Houston Smith says that in the entire history of humanity, there are really only two people who prompted a reaction, not just who are you, but what are you? One is Jesus of Nazareth, and the other is the Buddha. And indeed, when asked, what are you? The Buddha's response is, I am awake. And that's what Buddha means, the awakened one. Well, the thought is most of us go through life in a stage of near sleep. But there is something we can do to wake up. The Buddha was a contemporary of Confucius, of Lao Tzu, of the earliest of the Greek philosophers, and ended up having a dramatic effect on first the history of India and then the history of Asia more broadly. He was raised as a prince inside a palace, and his father had gotten a prophecy that the Buddha would grow up to become a religious figure, and he did not want that to happen. He wanted him to take over the kingdom. His job was to become king. So he kept him inside the palace, did not want him to see anything that would actually make him start tending toward this religious life. However, the Buddha did finally manage to get some people to allow him to travel outside the palace grounds. And when he did, the first time he saw an old person. He had been carefully protected so that he never saw anyone old. He was not allowed to realize that people grow old. He had never seen disease. He had never seen death. But on these various travels, the story goes, he encountered these things. He saw a dead body. He saw someone who was ill. He saw someone who was old. And finally, he sees a monk, someone who is devoting himself to the religious life. And the Buddha at that point, although he had a wife and a small child and was living in the palace as a prince, decided he had to go out and follow that monk-like life. And so he went out and followed, you might say, the opposite, the path of indulgence that he had been experiencing in the palace. He went out and adopted an ascetic attitude of renouncing everything. It's said that he ate just one bean a day to keep himself alive, and that he became so thin it was possible for him to put his hands around his waist and have them meet. Whether that's true or not, he certainly, for a long time, lived a life of extreme renunciation. Finally, he experienced enlightenment under the Bodhi tree and came back preaching 4 noble truths in his first sermon. Here are the 4 noble truths. First, life is suffering. Sometimes translated as life is painful. The term here that's used in the Pali, which is the old language of Nepal, fairly close to Sanskrit, is really what we use for a dislocated joint. So in some sense it means life is out of joint. Life is dislocated. We are, if in Hinduism we are basically matching the structure of the world and the world matches our desires, in Buddhism that is not true at all. Life is out of joint with the world. Why? Well, desire, craving, clinging, those are the cause of suffering. It is because we want things that we suffer. Well then, there is a way of eliminating that craving and eliminating that suffering, namely the experience of Nirvana. What is the path to Nirvana? It is the Eightfold Noble Path. And so what we get here in the 4 Noble Truths can be understood in terms of a medical analogy. Life is suffering. That's the symbol. You're suffering. You find life painful in various ways. That's bad. What do you do about it? Well, here's the diagnosis. Your problem is desire. It is craving. It is clinging. Now, what do I do about it, Doc? Well, here's the prognosis. There is a cure to your disease. There is a cure to this suffering, to life being out of joint. It is Nirvana. But now, what's the prescription? How do I get there, Doc? How do you cure me? The answer is the Eightfold Noble Path. Now that tells you the prescription. That tells you what to do to avoid suffering. And so the 4 Noble Truths are in a way very simple. Diagnosis, life is painful. Cause, it's desire. Solution, eliminate desire. How do I do that? Eightfold Noble Path. Now, here is how it's expressed in the first sermon. Life is suffering, painful, out of joint. This, O monks, is the noble truth of suffering. Dukkha is the term in the Pali. Birth is suffering. Decay is suffering. Illness is suffering. Death is suffering. Being around what we hate is suffering. Being apart from what we love is suffering. Not to obtain what we desire is suffering. Briefly, clinging to existence is suffering. So all of those things cause us suffering. Not only the ultimate suffering of disease, pain, death, old age, and so on, but also being around things you hate or people you hate. Being away from people you love. Being away from things you love. That's something that is painful. Now, what causes it? This is the noble truth of the cause of suffering, the craving. Tanha is the term, which leads to rebirth, accompanied by pleasure and lust, finding its delight here and there. This craving is threefold: craving for pleasure, craving for existence, craving for prosperity. And so it's because you want things you don't have, you find existence painful. Well, the response then, the solution, cut it out. This is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It leads to the complete cessation of craving. Abandoning passion with the abandoning of craving. Getting rid of the destruction of desire. And finally, how do I do that? Follow the Eightfold Noble Path. Okay, right thought, right intention, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, and right meditation. Well, we can talk about each one of those. So, right thought. Here is the line that is repeated again and again in the Dhammapada. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. That is something that is not one of the noble truths, but nevertheless a profound underlying insight. All that we are is the result of what we've thought. And so if we want to get our lives in order, we have to correct our thinking. Okay? Everything is founded on our thoughts, made up of our thoughts. Now, what is it to think correctly? Well, you've got to know the Four Noble Truths. You've got to avoid harmful thoughts. And the Buddha stresses that's a really hard thing to do. Try to go 5 minutes, he says at one point, without thinking a negative thought about anything or anyone. Now, it sounds easy. You might think, I'm a positive person, I'm a happy person. Surely it wouldn't be hard. But set a time, okay, and think, can I think something that is just absolutely positive for 5 minutes? Can I avoid any negative thought? So if you can do it, try an hour. If you can do that, try a day. You're going to find it very hard because you will have all sorts of negative thoughts. And the same thing is true with right speech, right intention, and so on. You're going to say negative things. You're going to intend negative things. So all of these are very difficult. He says the wise man is straight in thought. It's difficult to guard and difficult to hold back. It's good to tame the mind, difficult to hold it in. So you've got to guard your thoughts. Right intention, you've got to try to eliminate selfish desire. There is no satisfying desires, even by a shower of gold pieces. He who knows that desires have a short taste and cause pain, he is wise. And a lot of Buddhist texts talk about the pains involved in pleasures. There are no pleasures that are just sort of pure pleasures and that have no pain attached to them, no suffering attached to them, at the very least because those pleasures end. And so there is no fire like passion, there is no losing throw like hatred. There is no pain like this body. There is no happiness higher than stillness. Right speech. Avoid saying harmful things. And so don't speak harshly to anybody. Don't say anything negative. Don't criticize. Don't express anger in speech. All of that's going to touch you. And so it will lead to strife. It will keep you away from the goal. So this is a powerful one. He who says what is not goes to hell. He who, having done the thing, says he hasn't done the thing, also goes to hell. After death, both are equal. They are men with evil deeds in the next world. So in short, saying something bad, lying, all of that is really equivalent to doing very bad things. Right conduct. Well, avoid harming others. And obey the 5 restraints. What are the 5 restraints? They're very close to the ones in Hinduism, but not exactly. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't be unchaste. And don't ingest intoxicants. Now you might say, look, the very first principle, you might say, of the underlying ethical restraint implicit in the Four Noble Truths is that desire is bad. You've got to eliminate desire. So don't covet is already there. And so that's not listed here as one of these. Instead, no drinking, no drugs, things like that. It's surprising maybe to find that among the basic rules. And yet why? Why would that be among the basic rules? What's wrong with drinking from the Buddhist point of view? Yeah. Good. It makes that control of thought very difficult. It tends to increase desire. It's something that, in short, leads you away. Yes. Oh, sure. Go ahead. It's also lost the little cap on it, which is why it kept falling out of my...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, right livelihood. It's important to enter the right career. Some careers are going to keep you pointed in the right direction, are going to keep you on the path of trying to not only obey the restraints, but actually avoid desire. Others are going to promote desire. So there are going to be careers that constantly tempt you to something that is bad. Other careers are going to lead you in a good direction. So there are certain careers that are absolutely prohibited to a Buddhist. Now, what would be some examples of careers you would think a Buddhist would say, no, you mustn't do that, because it's a whole pattern of bad action, or at least a temptation to bad action. Yeah?
Bartender.
A bartender, good. Bartender, bad thing. Why? You shouldn't ingest intoxicants, and even if the bartender doesn't partake, he's encouraging other people to partake. So, yeah, can't be a bartender. What else? Yeah. Ooh, an actor, because they're lying. Some Buddhists indeed would agree with that. An actor lies, right? Says, I'm Richard III. And he's not Richard III. What a lie. Now, not all Buddhists would think that, but some indeed would. Yeah.
Well, I don't personally think so, but I'm just wondering, just based on a logical extension. But prostitution?
Prostitution, yeah, exactly. That's a matter of not only giving into one's desires, but even if you don't enjoy it, you're giving, you're promoting desire in others. Other examples like this. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say a soldier.
Good, a soldier. Now, soldier, armament maker, and all of this. Is that permitted or not? You might think at first glance, no. But actually, the Buddha has a subtle distinction to draw here. I'm not sure in the end I agree with this distinction, but here's the idea. He says there's a huge difference between the maker of shields and the maker of arrows. The maker of shields is trying to stop people from being harmed. The maker of arrows is trying to harm them. And so he really says it's dependent, right? Are you in an army that's going to attack others? Then that's impermissible. Are you in an army that's there purely for defense? Then it's permissible. So it really depends on the nature of specifically what you're doing in the military, whether that's acceptable or not. Here's one that I think is at first glance most puzzling. You're not allowed to be a caravan trader. Traveling salesman, that type of thing. Why not? Yeah.
You promote desire as far as you're trying to sell goods that may not be essential to someone's existence.
Ooh, well, you may be promoting desire by selling in essential goods, promoting their materialism and so on. There's something else wrong with the traveling part. Yeah. Well, it does make you focused on money, and so it leads you towards something that promotes desire within you. But also the traveling part, you have no incentive not to cheat people. And so it tempts you to cheat your customers. Because after all, they can't come and complain to you. You're gone. And so there's something about that he thinks is dangerous. Right effort. You've got to constantly work to avoid selfish desire. This is hard. It is not something you can do easily. It requires great effort in order to avoid temptation. And so you're going to constantly be tempted to give in to desire. This is something that you must resist with the strength of an ox and the persistence of an ox. Right concentration. You've got to develop mental powers that allow you to avoid desire. And then finally, right meditation to cease those fluctuations and witness the illumination of the object as it actually is. These are borrowed entirely from Hinduism. Now, in the end, there are two kinds of Buddhism, actually more, but these are the two chief kinds. There is Theravada Buddhism. It consists of the southern canon, it's called, the early writings of the Buddha, the early sermons, and it's dominant in Southeast Asia. Its ideal is the Arhat, the saint. And the other is Mahayana Buddhism, which consists of a northern canon of somewhat different writings, many of them later, and it's the dominant form of Buddhism in China, Korea, and Japan. Its ideal is the Bodhisattva. And so let me close by just talking about those two ideals. The Arhat is the saint, one who achieves enlightenment and experiences nirvana, has a cessation of desire. The chief virtue of the Arhat is wisdom. And so this is the goal of Theravada Buddhism, to become enlightened, to become an Arhat, to become one who actually overcomes desire and achieves nirvana. The Mahayana ideal is the Bodhisattva, the one who postpones enlightenment in order to help others attain it. And so this person actually promotes the enlightenment of others. The chief virtue is compassion. And there's a wonderful story about people out in the desert who are looking for an oasis to illustrate the difference. These four travelers are there in the desert. They're about to die of thirst when someone sees in the distance what could be a mirage but appears to be an oasis. So they head for it. And they finally, exhausted, at the end of their strength, get it. And they say, we're finally here. There is a wall, there are trees here that looks like an oasis. But we don't really know what's behind here, whether it's dangerous, whether we'll be killed if we try to approach. You go check it out, and then report back to us. So one of them climbs the wall, goes back over, and then they hear nothing from it. They wait, and they think, well, I don't know what's going on. So the second one says, well, I'll check it out. So he goes, here's nothing. The third does the same. And finally the fourth climbs the wall, looks in, realizes it is a beautiful oasis. And there are the previous three. They're enjoying the pool of water and quenching their thirst. This guy asks for them to pass him just enough so that he can go back out into the desert and help direct others who might be traveling to the oasis. That's the Bodhisattva. The first three are the arhats, the ones who enjoy the enlightenment themselves, but the last one partakes of just enough to know how to help others. And so that becomes the ideal, those who take as their task enlightening others.